We're on to the final step of stone veneer, which is filling all of the cracks with grout. This helps waterproof it and give it the final finished look of a stone wall. I've done a lot of research on grouting, and there's a lot of varying information out there on the internet. I've seen the mixtures of the sand to cement ratio go anywhere from 2:1 to 5:1 sand to cement. And so yesterday I was kind of curious about this. I mixed up a couple little sample batches and put them on this piece of plywood just with some scraps of stone. I did a 2:1 and a 3:1, and the 3:1 seems kind of sandy and sort of loose. The 2:1 feels better, although it looked like it dried just a hair darker, or maybe it's not fully dry yet. But hopefully this helps kind of decide what we're gonna do. Whatever we decide on, we need to keep it consistent throughout the whole project, because it will influence the color and the overall appearance of the wall when it's done. We're definitely gonna keep it the same on one single wall. We're gonna try to do at least one whole wall at a time. That way there's no color or shading change in the grout lines in the middle of the wall. Before mixing up any grout, we wanted to screen the mortar and sand to make sure there were no chunks in the mix that would mess us up. Our in-house carpenter Elena got to work making a sieve for the wheelbarrow out of scrap wood and some extra door screening.
Alex just taught me a little tip. So I originally stapled these vertically, and you can see that this fabric was just tearing through this. So he said you don't want to staple in the same direction that the tension is in. You would put this horizontally and then put a little piece of cardboard underneath it, and it acts as a washer. He learned this from Kyle at R&R Buildings.
It turns out we didn't really need to screen the sand. Even when it was damp, it didn't clump up. But the other main ingredient, our Lehigh Type S masonry cement, was a different story. It sat for a good while in the garage and must have had some moisture get in over time, which caused lots of clumping, even in a fresh bag. But the screen did its job, and the final result was as smooth as baby powder. After seeing how the samples dried and looking at the consistency of the mix, we decided on a 2:1 mix, so 2 sand to 1 cement, and that is what we mixed up. However, we thought we were going to be using these grout bags, basically a cake decorator's bag for mortar. So the guys mixed the cement really loose and kind of watery in order to be able to flow through the grout bags. But what we found was they did not really work out as intended.
We're going to end up cutting these tips off.
Coming out too slow?
Yeah.
All of the water basically started squeezing out first. It was really hard to keep the paste consistent. Even when it started consistent, by the end of the squeeze, it would end up sort of clogging the tip. So they're definitely easier to use on horizontal surfaces because you can let gravity help you and let the water sort of flow out. But on the wall, it's tough. And it also makes kind of a mess. All that runny grout mixture tends to drip on the face of the stones and out of the joints, and it doesn't really work super well. They do make super plasticizer chemicals that allow you to mix less water in but still get the same flowability. So I've considered using one of those in order to use the grout bag, but I called the guy, Sean, who was the foreman for the crew who did our block, and they also do a lot of stone veneer. And his recommendation was honestly just to mix the mix kind of dry and hand pack it in off a trowel. It's pretty tedious, pretty labor intensive, but it does yield a cleaner job at the front end because you don't have to come back and clean all the excess drippage down the face of the stones, and it lets you have a little bit more control over like how tightly the joint is packed full. And overall, I think that's what we're gonna end up doing, is coming back and hand packing. I don't even know if we can afford to have the guys do that though. I think I'm gonna observe them, and then Elaine and I are gonna finish it out.
Make sure you get that mud packed in there way back and tight, even when you gotta turn your slicker sideways.
You're trying to fill the joint completely.
Yep.
Completely, yep. Otherwise water can get back there and pop it out.
Moisture, water.
Well, I didn't get much film of it this morning, but we got the little wall behind the AC units done. It definitely went a lot better with the dry pack. First of all, because it wasn't so sloppy and you're not getting this liquid mud all over the face of the stones, but also just a lot more control. It's what the guys are used to as well, and it's turning out really well. So kind of our process is they're going through, filling all the joints up. I'm coming back after it sets up a little bit and kind of cutting the edges around the stone so the stones are a little bit more visible. They're kind of filling it out flush to really pack that joint tight. And then finally, I'm taking a gloved finger to smooth out any of the imperfections where I came back with the cutting tool to cut around the edges and sort of making it look like one refined joint. And then once it sets up even more, I'm taking this horsehair brush and brushing off the excess sand and whatnot. This is gonna dry a little bit lighter, but overall it's looking really good so far.
feel dry enough?
I think so, yeah. Yep. I'd rather get a start on it, that way it doesn't run away.
Rock hard,
Yeah. I'm just basically trying to take this top layer, cutting back about 1/8 to 1/4 inch, but I'm compressing and packing it back in there as I go. Getting that joint nice and full will help with keeping water out and just helping it last. But I didn't want it to be flush across the top. I think that looks kind of hokey. I like being able to see the definition and getting some shadow lines from the edges of the stone. That's why we're raking it back. But this is kind of a matter of personal preference. I think it looks a lot better raked back, but some people like it just smooth flush. Every now and then I'll come to a little void that might have gotten missed. I'll just take some of the scrap off the ground. It's kind of like a damp, powdery mixture. Just a slow, pretty tedious process, but it's kind of satisfying at the same time. And to look good at the end.
Well, the weather does not look promising. We've made a decent amount of progress. By we, I mean Alex and the guys. He's working on cleaning up the last area that the guys did right before they left, hoping to get it done before we get some torrential downpour, which it seems like we might. So we're reusing our rock wool bags to try to cover the walls here. We'll see if it works. We are close to the finish line, on this wall at least. Anytime there's a storm like this, it seems like we're on a mad dash to make sure things are properly covered. We need to get some more tools in the garage before this rain comes, so we'll catch you later, hopefully after the storm passes.
Thankfully, this was just a normal thunderstorm because we were still recovering from tornado PTSD at this point.
Today we're continuing to mortar. Alex is finishing up a couple of spots here on this wall, and then we're gonna move to the front. The front is definitely the most critical because we want it to look really good when people drive up the driveway. So can you explain to everyone why you put some stones back behind there?
This is our main electric service cable coming in through here, and then this conduit goes back down under our slab over to our main panel. This is a pull elbow, or an LB as some folks call it in the electrical trades. These are not supposed to be buried, so I'm basically creating like a bit of a window well around this to keep any rocks or soil back from it. And so you'll be able to see down in there, at least for the time being, unless I create a cap. So I decided to put some decorative stones down in there, and I still have to do the grouting on it. This is the size of the block out. This is just pressure treated wood that I made this out of. Eventually I might replace it with just a cast in place little concrete window well of some sort. That way we can put a lid on it and make it look nice, and we might put a walkway here eventually anyway, so it can just be kind of hidden in that walkway. The hand packing process was definitely slow going, but a pretty low pressure and simple task that took more time than skill. It was kind of a peaceful task where your mind could wander a little without consequence. We were glad we picked it up to finish the rest of the walls out, both to save the hourly cost of having the masons here and because we are so particular on how it looks. After several more hours of hand packing grout between the stones, we have finally gotten all 300 square foot done, and we think it turned out fantastic. After it was all done, Elena took a closer look, and there were a couple areas, especially where the guys were helping and going kind of quickly, that there's some excess mortar here at the edges of the stones that we're gonna have to wash off. Elena's figured out a good process for that and has already done the whole one side. She's basically just using our little electric pressure washer, giving it a good spray along the edge, and then using my little multi-tool with a smooth blade to scrape that bit off, and it doesn't damage the stones or anything. For some of the tighter areas and smaller stones, she's just using a hand tool as well. This is a pretty tedious process, but she's very particular about how it looks. When she looks up close, she wants to see these things nice and clean. So I've given her that task to clean that off. On the walls where it was just Elena and I going quite slow, we were actually able to keep the edges of the stone really clean though, so we don't have to clean the majority of this. It's just the first couple walls the guys helped with. I want to also talk quickly about what the plan is for grade level here. Obviously we stopped the stone short. I want to backfill up to about 2 inches from this with more of this number 57 stone and slope it out so there's a grade away from the house. Then I'm going to put some non-woven driveway fabric that we have left over as sort of a weed barrier, and that will also help shed water away rather than going right through the stones and sitting up against the foundation. Not that it really matters anyway because we don't have any enclosed space below our slab in the garage. But on top of that driveway fabric, I'm going to use some decorative river rock stones, probably 3 or 4 feet out from the foundation. That'll keep any soil away from the house, which along with water is what encourages termite activity. And it will also just keep maintenance a lot easier around the perimeter. I think it'll be a clean and low maintenance landscaping solution in the long run. Of course, we can't forget that the bottom of this wall is open to drain any moisture behind the wall out, so we cannot impede that. That's why I'm going to stop the number 57 stone a couple inches below this, and then the decorative rock is large enough. There's some 3 or 4 inch diameter pieces in there that I'll basically put them up against the bottom of this, but I'm going to keep a gap open under here to allow this wall to drain. The very last step on this stone veneer is filling between our trims and our stone. So we took our temporary trim boards off that we had just as a mock-up. We've put our final trim on now. It looks fantastic. And we have to do the final fill in between the stone and the trim. And I've already done one. I'm using a product called Morflex. This is a Sashco product. It's basically a textured sealant and it stretches. This is their gray color. And I did this back door first to make sure that the color matched. And it's actually a little bit lighter than the mortar that we have. From a distance you couldn't tell, but from up close I think it's pretty obvious, and that's why I did the back door first. So I ordered the next darker color of this for the rest of it, and I'm gonna see how well that matches. I wanted to use a flexible sealant between the PVC and the stone because the PVC will move with temperature seasonally and there's gonna always be a gap of some sort there. So having a flexible sealant that looks like mortar is the perfect product for this application. But if I'm not able to get a perfect color match, I may just pack regular mortar in that joint and see what happens. If a small gap opens over time, I can use a smaller bead of Morflex to fill that gap. This is basically what we did for when our pipes are coming through. I mean, this is PVC as well, similar to our trim, and we just packed the normal mortar around it. So far so good. We'll see how it looks in several years, but we can always fill around any gap that forms here with Morflex if needed. We did the same thing for our Aqua hose boxes, which look wonderful by the way, so we will see how this holds up long term, and if any gap opens up here, then I can seal it. Now that the stone veneer project is essentially complete, just thinking back and reflecting on this design choice we made, while it was definitely not the cheapest option, we are really happy we went this direction. There's other panelized products on the market like Versetta stone that make installation really easy, or there's cultured stone or basically cast concrete stones that sort of look like natural stone but not exactly. But in our opinion, there's just no replicating the shape, color, and texture variation of natural stone applied in a mosaic pattern with the hand grouted joints. It definitely took significantly more time than if we went with a panelized or grout-free product, but we're planning to live on this property a long time, so it was worth it to us to put a little bit of extra time, money, and effort up front into getting the exact look that we wanted, so we'd be happy looking at it every day in the long run. If you're curious about how much the stone veneer project costs, both in materials and labor, we're eventually going to do a cost breakdown video on it and have a detailed spreadsheet up on our website if you're interested. I'll make sure to update the pinned comment of this video when that's ready. But that is a wrap on stone veneer for this project. As always, thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one.